Hey there, spooky friends, and welcome to another special guest episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace. This is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And today we have Rhett. Rhett, do you have a YouTube, Instagram, or a name that you'd like to go by that people can find you at?
Not yet. I'm working on that.
I really like that question because it reminds me of X-Men 2. I don't know if you all remember X-Men 2 when they have to like link up with Magneto to go after the guys trying to kill all the humans.
I'm wondering where this is going.
In the end, they're on the ship and Magneto asks Pyro what his name is. And Pyro goes, John. And he goes, what's your real name, John? And he goes, Pyro. So I like asking people like, what's your name? What's your handle? Because it's like asking someone like, would you prefer if I called you Neo? So you get that chance right there to change it. But sorry, tangent to start off.
I have one in mind. Tell me what you think of it, since you are the people who would know better than anybody I know. I want to call it Harsh Rhetoric because I think I'm a pretty good speaker, and I'm very opinionated.
I think that is a perfect name.
That's really good because I'm assuming, oh, well, no, I can see it on the screen. You instead of Rhetoric, right? You're putting your name in there, which is genius.
It's
Everybody
a
loves
pun.
that.
Yeah. It's a chef's kiss. Mwah.
Chef's kiss.
Oh, Lifetime Achievement Award. I'll take that chef's kiss. I'm never going to wash this off.
Great. I am glad to hear that. As soon as I look at Robin, she decides she needs to take a shower. So it's nice to hear that someone appreciates it. Not really. But anyways, thank you so much for joining us, Rhett. We sincerely appreciate having you here. It's kind of funny too, because we actually met Rhett through a spooky friend, which is the Snarked, otherwise known as Justin.
If you folks have been with us for a while, you've definitely heard of the Snarked.
He's a very active member of our community. And it's just so nice that we can like branch out and meet people. And we met Rhett and his beautiful wife at a coffee shop here in Las Vegas called Bad Owl.
Who is a published writer.
Yeah, it was awesome. We got a book. I started reading it. It's really, really fun too. I'm in the middle of reading like Wheel of Time, and I got to take a break and cleanse my palate on this book. It's a book called Runaway. It's part of the Landis Chronicles. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
You are.
Awesome. And it is by V. Bricker and K. Nobles. And it is published by Bricker and Nobles, correct?
It is.
Yes.
Which is pretty amazing.
So
as someone who
amazing.
went to school for creative writing and has done jack shit with it. I think this is a wonderful accomplishment, and shout out to your amazing wife. I think you're both incredibly talented people, and it's just an honor to have you on the show. So one last time, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I will do my utmost to disabuse you of that notion while I'm here.
Right on. So one of the things that happened when we were at this Bad Owl Cafe is we're sitting around, and the Snarked, as he is wont to do, began talking about the fact that we have this podcast called Scaryish. And I think folks, when they hear it, go one of two ways. They're either like, oh, yeah, that's cool. Like, they don't give a shit about podcasts, or they don't give a shit about paranormal stuff or true crime stuff. And then some folks like, I have a story that I want to tell you. In a lot of cases, we're like, okay, cool. Write it down and email it to us that we can read on the show. And when Rhett started telling his story, I was like, okay, 1, finish the story. We want to hear all this. And 2, you're going to come on for a special guest episode because I think the listeners all need to hear it from your very articulate mouth. So
thank you.
I'm very, very excited to dive into some of the stories that you have to share with us tonight. So let's go ahead and just start off wherever you are most comfortable.
All right. Well, in the interest of getting myself invited back on here, I have a choice of 3 stories for you in a sort of choose-your-own-adventure format. I have an incredibly sad, kind of gross, and generally awful peering into the dark pits of the human soul story.
I can't wait for that one. Just to be clear.
I have a humorous story, and I have just a very general. I wouldn't say it's run of the mill because this is the kind of thing that regular people never get to do, but it's what I would consider fairly on brand for you. Normal level of scary-ish rather than just like, pants crapping terror.
I vote we do general, Pit of Darkness, and then funny to kind of uplift us towards the end. What about you, Robin? What's your desired order?
I agree.
Okay, cool.
You bring us down there in the middle. Just bring us down into the deepest, darkest depths and then pull us back up.
And if you're one of those people that just likes to hurt, you can stop after the second story if you so choose, and then come back whenever you're in the need of uplifting. I don't recommend doing that, but I vote for general story to begin with.
I'll tell you what, I believe I can comfortably get through 2 of these stories at the time that we have, and I'll go in the order that you recommend. But in order to not end on a complete downer note, because it is fucking depressing.
Oh, no.
I will tell you a fantastic story at the end that is...
Okay, go.
that isn't Scaryish at all, but is actually super cool. And I'll end on that note, if that's okay with you. If we can end slightly off-brand. So your on-brand story. I was at Fort Hood, Texas. I was a soldier in the U.S. Army.
Thank you for your service.
Yes.
Thank you. I was a soldier in the U.S. Army. I was in the 1st Cavalry Division. I will tell you that I was an Arabic linguist. And at that time,
that's super impressive.
That is so impressive.
At that time, I spoke fluent Arabic. I've been losing it little by little since then. And if that sounds like a waste of your taxpayer dollars, then I don't know what to tell you. But so everybody knows about Fort Hood. It's where the blue on blue violence happens. And make no mistake, Fort Hood is awful. It is. It's like third world America. But there's a place that no one knows about, or at least not very many people know about, called West Fort Hood, which is on the other side of the freeway. And West Fort Hood is in sort of like east central Texas and is kind of like the forest primeval, right? There's a couple of big hills that were they not in Texas would qualify as mountains. And there's like a landing strip there and a few other things, and really not a lot going on over there. And that is where our story will unfold. So Fort Hood is in Killeen, Texas, which is very much a military town. And my friend Stacy and Stacy was a Korean linguist. My friend Stacy and I had a thing where we would go out to dinner. I don't know, probably every 2 weeks or so. And in this particular case, for some reason, I don't remember exactly why, my roommate Chong, also a Korean linguist, in the sense that he was a native Korean speaker and also spoke English.
All right.
Makes him less of a linguist and more of an actual like Korean speaker. But
I was gonna say he's a linguist, like I'm an English linguist,
right? Yeah, exactly. Like we're all English linguists. Like, oh, let's break this stuff out. But Chong's a good guy. I kind of lost track of him in the meantime, but I still talk to Stacy, and we still reminisce about this. So,
oh gosh, okay,
yeah, oh yeah, it was. I can't really speak for her experience, but I will tell you to the best of my ability to attempt to narrate my own pants crapping experience with this. So, we go out to dinner, and that part is completely irrelevant to the story. But we come back to West Fort Hood, and we're just driving around kind of like waiting for food to settle, and we're talking, and she's just not driving in any particular direction, just sort of like basically at every intersection, she is turning away from civilization, and we end up on this windy road that goes up one of the mountains. And sort of everyone on West Fort Hood has seen these. The mountain has dotted along the road, sort of spiraled and dug into the side of the mountain, these great big bunkers, right? These huge 8 to 12 inch thick doors. And they're all locked with just everything about them screams go away. They have like hazardous material placards on them, like 5 or 6 layers of them sort of
that just doesn't sound good.
Sort of peeling off, and you like, I mean, you know, like it rains there all the time. It's Texas. It's very humid. And so nothing really sticks outside. And, you know, the labels are peeling off, and you drive past one and you're like, did I just see a biohazard trefoil? Like, what did I just see? And I mean, there's really no reason to stop, and there's not really a lot of place to stop, as we're driving up this thing. And we're like, and Stacy, who worked on Fort Hood, on West Fort Hood at that time, had never seen these before, and neither had I. I know that I had seen others that were similar where they kept ammunition, like so many bullets. You're like, oh, it's the Army. Of course they have a lot of bullets. Like, it beggars belief how many bullets. And for all kinds of cool weapons. And it is... so let me back up a little bit. Going into one of these ammo bunkers, the ones that I had been in, I don't know if any of you know this, but Texas has no mountains because it's not that stable, the land there. And while I was inside getting some ammunition for a range, because I was my unit's armor at that time, the guy who keeps track of all the guns and bullets, so many bullets, I was picking them up, and you can't pull the truck in, so they just have a propane forklift inside to move your pallets and pallets of bullets. so many bullets, to get them onto the truck. Well, I go in there, and I'm all the way in the back, and I'm like, this is scary. It's all painted white. It's extremely well lit, and all the guys in there are, they're just, this is just Tuesday for them. They're just doing their jobs in there, counting out bullets. And then the whole thing shifts, right? The whole mountain shifts a little bit, and some white flecks start coming down from the ceiling as, like, it feels to my lizard brain, it feels like the entire geometry of the tunnel has changed. And there's this sort of like white motes of dust that obviously paint flecks that came from the ceiling are dancing in the light. And the guy looks over at me and he goes, "What?" And I was like, "Is that supposed to happen?" He's like, "It happens from time to time. Don't worry though. If one of these collapses, you won't feel it." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. That's reassuring."
Right? Oh my god.
I don't know how much he was joking. It's the army. Everybody has kind of a sense of gallows humor. So I had to tell you this story to go back to the other one. So I have been inside these bunkers before, at least ones that kind of look like this. So I didn't think it was that weird when driving up this hill, we saw one that was open. And I was like, hey, that one's open. And we all sort of looked at each other like,
let's go in.
Everything about this screams, keep out. But, we're fearless military types. Nothing scares us. Absolutely nothing.
So funny.
Not, existential fear or even like mortal fear. So what's the worst that could happen if we go in there? So the good news is we're not completely off the edge of the map. We're not going to get into a huge amount of trouble because all the hazardous material placards have long since fallen off and they're in the gutter. Well, they weren't on the door, so I never saw them. And they
didn't exist.
We pry this thing open, and you can't see me. I don't have any video, but I'm not a little guy. And at that point, with body fat in the single digits, it took everything I had to get this door open. Like, I don't know, 8 inches, 9 inches from the sliver that it was open to begin with. I threw my whole back into it and barely got this thing open enough that I could get my chest through. And so we all go inside, and it is black. It is the Stygian abyss. You know how, like, when you open a door from a hallway into a dark room, there's a little triangle of light that spills in, and people would say, "Oh, darkness isn't a force, it's just the absence of light." Not here. In this mountain, darkness is a force. And you can see the triangle of light coming in. And if you put your hand in it, you can see it. However, none of the light is reflecting. So if you don't have your hand in the shaft of light, you can't see it.
That's so terrifying.
That's terrifying.
It
I
is.
hate darkness, so.
And I can already kind of feel like that creeping sensation of sensory deprivation, which makes this all the better. And so my friend Stacy is like, "Wow, I can't see shit." So she goes back out to her car and gets her camera, which is like an older. This is probably early 2004. And she goes back and gets her camera, which is like an early SLR, like a standard, normal person digital camera, nothing special, but it had that, that flash. And that was what she wanted to use.
I gotta say, using a flash as a flashlight is a very horror movie trope.
Yes, it's like every flash, something just comes closer and closer and closer to you.
Yeah, funny you would say that. That's funny you would pick those words. But yeah, and Sean goes back and gets an LED pen light, which does nothing. I could see like that it was on, but it barely illuminated his face when he held it almost up to his skin.
The darkness was strong here.
It's an abyss. Until I can hear the capacitor spooling up in the camera, and it takes a picture. It looks more or less like that other bunker, except there's no bullets in it, or maybe there were, but I didn't see them. And there are bits and pieces of pallets lying around on the inside, and there are bags of spoiled concrete, right? Bags of concrete that got wet, laying up against the sides. And in the other bunker, they had a light fixture, and then they had some cables that were slung to the next one, because you can't really run cables. It all has to be on the surface, if you will, because you can't run it between the walls. There is no between the walls. It's just solid rock on the outside. Or unsolid rock, as the case may be.
Oh my god.
And so these have all been removed, leaving a trail of non-mildew, or slightly less mildew, sort of strung down the walls like, I don't know, like tinsel at Christmas time. Like the world's most corrosive Christmas. And she takes a picture, and we all look, and I mean, this is probably, I know this is scientifically impossible, but to my eye, I can see that there is darkness before and darkness after the parts of the image where the light is. Like, it's just a packet of light going down and coming back. That's what it felt like. And in that time, she took a couple of pictures, right? She snapped it a couple of times. And every time she snapped a picture, it seemed like everything subtly changed.
Oh my god.
That's so creepy.
Was she moving while she was taking a picture, or was she just standing still?
Good question. No way to know. But but so she takes a couple of pictures, and she can't really see what me and Chong are seeing. And Chong, I sort of moved to adjust myself, and I ran into Chong, and Chong is rigid. Like someone riveted his boots to the ground, or probably shoes, since we were just in normal clothes, right? Every muscle is tight. And I'm like, Chong. And then she takes another picture, and all of those cement bags and crap leaning up against the walls to my sensory deprived brain start looking like bodies. And
what the
Get out.
fuck?
Yeah. And I mean, not, very well old and decomposed bodies, but one is enough. And, I'm like, Stacy, I think we should leave. And she's like, yeah. And Chong said what was sort of bubbling at the bottom of my subconscious. He said, I just want to get out of here before someone closes that door.
Oh my
Right.
god.
It's like that old horror trope of the door closing behind you. It being a door that is so heavy that you could barely move it. I can't imagine the fear that would be just running through someone's system that could possibly close behind you.
Exactly. And that was the last moment where we're like, okay, we're going to make an orderly exit now, as we all crammed into the door trying to get out, just completely unmanned, trying to get out of that bunker.
That's so freaking terrifying.
That is absolutely terrifying.
I would not go into one. If I saw how dark it was, that door just opening up into darkness, I would be like, nope, I'm out. Fuck this. Ugh, I do not have the courage to walk in there.
It is just so funny to me that it winds up being a camera that's illuminating it. And it's like a strobe light effect. It's like the beginning of Blade if you were the vampires. It's not something that's going to make you feel comfortable. And then the more the light turns on, the worse things start to get. It's almost like a creepypasta or an SCP, where it's like the bunker changes the longer you're inside it or something creepy like that.
Exactly.
And, I'm happy you made it out.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, it's the worst of all worlds, right? Like, you're standing there in this darkness, this active living darkness, and you're experiencing immediate sensory deprivation. Like, everything in your body is like, hey man, you are not equipped for whatever it is you're doing. You need to get out of here right now. And then, instead of sensory deprivation, you have sensory overload from a strobe on a camera, and suddenly your brain is going the other way, and it's like, no, you need to leave right now. Leave now.
The only thing that's unified in your body is the urge to get the hell out of there.
Yeah, but at the same time, and it was funny that it was sort of all of us, sort of going through the levels of this within a couple of blinks of each other, because you're trained to sort of in the Army, I mean, I can't really speak for the other services, but the Army, you're trained to sort of like confront fear and control it. And that's what everybody was trying to do, but it just goes to show that there is a limit to what you can do, with that. And there are some things that can just take your posture away, as it were, sort of bend your spine out of shape.
It's like you confronted the fear, you understood it, and you're like, now that I've gone through this logically, we still need to leave now.
Exactly. And I mean, it wasn't even like it just cut right through the training. You're like, oh shit. Like, this is mortal danger. I don't know what's in here. My whole body is screaming, we need to leave. And you're like, I mean, you're trying to resist it, but in the end, you're like, nope, I'm going. Bye.
So when you left, did you close it all the way? Did you even bother with the door? Or
Nope.
did you leave it where it was at when you found it?
I left it open, and I thought to myself, as I was leaving, I was like, what if there's something in there that isn't supposed to get out? And I was like, no, it was already open when I found it. I'm going to leave it a little more open to make it more obvious to anybody who's in charge who drives these roads, because there's people who are supposed to inspect them, that this clearly needs some attention. And,
have you checked like the local area around that time for like odd chupacabra killings or maybe some vampire sightings afterwards? Because it certainly has that feeling like you guys let something out.
No. I mean, no. But I will tell you one weird thing that happened afterwards.
Oh, God.
I tried to explain what happened to some of my more senior leaders, and I was like, hey, this weekend we were out at West Fort Hood, like looking at all these bunkers that are drilled to the side of the hill. And, the universal response that I got back was like, I'm like, hey, have you seen those? And the universal response was like, no.
Wow.
Like, have you just not gone? Or,
we know better. We know not to go.
Maybe that's the case. They don't want to acknowledge that they exist.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. I do not know. And I won't say exactly what my position was, but I will say that I was in an excellent position to find out, and no one would tell me. Whether they just didn't consider it important, which is totally possible because those are like left over from the Cold War. Which actually just adds another level of like, ooh, what's
right?
in there?
That's so terrifying.
And this was your general terrifying story, right? This wasn't the super terrifying one.
This was the one that was, well, the other one's not super scary. It's more awful, but it's also scary.
Any details that we left out before we move on to the next story?
Nope. Just a car with 3 trained soldiers, and no one would talk to anybody else.
Wow, that is so intense and terrifying. Like, I imagine stuff like that happens. I wouldn't say frequently whatsoever, but when you stumble into something like that, having the sense of preservation, of self-preservation to know, turn around and leave right now, activating in 3 separate people at the exact same time who have been, like, trained as soldiers to confront that fear is just shocking. Right.
I mean, none of us are by any means, Arctic scuba ninja assassins. Nobody hears the tip of the spear. But, we're not powerless to defend ourselves, and it's like, time to go.
All right. Well, that's, I think, a solid start to the stories you're about to tell us. So let's go ahead and transition into the next one, I would say. Let's jump onto it. I know we've talked about it. We've been leading up to this one as the more awful of the 3 stories. So let's see what you got.
All right. So, from that time, fast forward about 4 months. I have deployed to Iraq, and we are in a place called Thawra, or Sadr City, which is in northwest Baghdad, I think. I would have to look on a map. Don't hold me to that. It's a little slice of Baghdad that is extremely densely populated. It's like 10 square miles, which is nothing in a city, or maybe it's 10 square blocks, and like 1.3 million people. It's just unbelievable number of people crammed into a tiny area. So everything was sort of like high stress, high profile. They saw everything we did. We saw everything they did. And we all had to live in sort of this area. And I will say, even though things have kind of gone to hell, I can't speak for any unit other than my own 1st Cavalry Division. But since I have this platform, I will take a moment to say there was never a point where I thought we weren't trying to do right by the Iraqi people. and tried to make their lives better. And to wit,
Aw.
to butter you up for the awfulness that's coming, as we were leaving, the only moment that I really ever felt like the guy on the poster in the army was when somebody went to get a set of important documents that always come in a manila envelope. I won't say what they were, but as we were leaving, we were the ones who had overseen their referendum to pick the people who were going to draft their new constitution. And it was a big election, really cool experience. And someone had written on the ComSec, 9 million people voted for the first time in their lives, and you helped make it happen.
Wow.
And I was like, oh shit, I'm the guy on the poster. Just, not a lantern-jawed killing machine like the guy on the poster. But, so that was cool.
That's incredible. That's like a really powerful, poignant moment.
It was. I mean, now it's all gone to hell, but at the time, we did the best that we could with the orders that we were given. We built schools. We distributed supplies. We did our best to help them and make their lives better. I will say that. That said, the place that we stayed, there were 3 forward operating bases, and the one that we were at was in the headquarters of Saddam Hussein's Internal Security Bureau in Baghdad, which is kind of like the secret police. And if you live in a country where they have a secret police, you know that secret police, A, aren't secret, and B, aren't police.
Right.
And they are basically an atrocity squad. And this was no different, as you're about to see. We kept our ammo, this recurring theme of bullets.
Oh, God. Okay.
We kept our ammo in the central building, which was, and the reason we kept it there is because it was dug into a basement. Part of which was flooded. They never bothered to unflood it, which is a weird place to keep bullets, but I guess it was far enough away that it didn't matter. And the place where we kept the bullets was where the really scary stuff happened, and I had to go down there once. And I should preface what I'm about to tell you by saying that I am an extremely secular person. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in hauntings. I don't believe in anything that doesn't have some sort of plausible scientific explanation. However, if somebody, so I can't go on record as saying, yes, I think this, because I don't. I have no evidence to back it up. However, if in my lifetime somebody proved that there was an energy tied to people or to places or things that could be detected by other people, a sort of resonance, if you will, I would not be surprised.
You know, it's pretty shocking to me, too, since we started the show, because as a person who is a skeptic myself, I didn't know how much of an audience there would be for someone who, approaches things from kind of that perspective. And the more we've done episodes, and I mean, we have 198, but the more we started doing them, especially at the beginning, the more we were being reached out to by folks who think like this, where it's like, this isn't something that I necessarily believe in. I do think that there's a rational, logical explanation for most things. And that said, and then there's always some incredible story afterwards.
Right.
So it's so crazy that we're 4 years into this show and we keep hearing this thing. So now I'm very excited and kind of scared to hear what's about to come. So
this is the difficult part that nobody wants to hear, but everyone needs to hear. I had to go down there when I first got to where we were going to be at our forward operating base. I had to go get bullets, so many bullets, and I had to go into this secure building, and I didn't have anybody with me. I was just given a set of directions like turn left here, turn right here. So I got lost a couple times, and that was a formative distilling moment in my life, because in this place where we kept our bullets, it was basically built like a shower room, lots of little tiles, except there were dentist chairs in all of the showers.
That's so weird.
So I walked into a room that had a dentist chair that had been shoved against the wall, and all the grout near the dentist chair is brown.
Oh God, it's a torture chair.
And it's not like, oh, this is a torture chair. This isn't Dungeons and Dragons. This is not like an illustration. This is a place where actual people were actually tortured with actual torture instruments. And They weren't always strapped down. Sometimes they were just left in the room. And the reason I know that is because they had written, alternatively in blood or a pen if they could find it, or sometimes even their own feces, their sort of last will and testament, which if you don't speak Arabic is just gobbledygook on the wall. But if you do speak Arabic, holy shit.
Which you did.
Which I do. Statements like my wife taking this date, my son taking this date, me taking this date, tell my
oh my god,
tell my family I love them. I was a journalist. Don't let the truth die.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have cold chills.
That's so sad. That's fucked up. And that's the thing about war, right? It's so fucked up.
Yeah. There's a quote from MASH where I don't remember exactly what it is they're doing, but somebody says to Hawkeye, war is hell. And Hawkeye says, well, no, war is war and hell is hell. If you're in hell, there are no bystanders, right?
Wow.
Holy fuck.
That always kind of resonated with me. So I get lost a couple more times, and each of these places just has this heaviness about it. And mind you, I'm reading this by flashlight. And it just has this, it just sort of like slowed you down and pulled at you. There were some people who, even at the moment they knew or had already been tortured, right? And these guys didn't fuck around. Uday and Kusei, Saddam's sons, were the ones who ran this place. They were all for, genital branding and stuff like that. That these people who were being mutilated or had been mutilated were still like, don't let the truth die. I would do it again if I could. I mean, not exactly that, but, paraphrased, or, tell my wife I love her.
That's so sad.
It's impossible to imagine unless you were there for it. So hearing you talk about it is like, it's an incredibly powerful thing. And I think it's definitely something, like you said, that people do need to hear so they understand. Because I think that one of the most bizarre things, as a person who was raised by a Marine, for me growing up, is to hear people glorify war. And my dad told me something very young, and it's whenever he'd hear people talk about the glory of war, he said, it's always the people who are never there. And that's all he ever talked to me about it. I've gotten older, and he's talked to me a lot more about certain things that, I'll probably save for if he ever decides to come on the show, that he can say in his own words. But yeah, that's terrible. Like, it's terrible in the actual true sense of that word too.
I will say this for people who glorify war, because there are people who can't stop going back to it. There is no feeling in the entire world. There is no drug. There is no high as taking your life into your own hands and being ultimately the master of your destiny. It's a contest of you versus someone else, and you are better trained and better equipped. It is at an age where you feel absolutely invincible. It is a heady feeling. And for people who can't leave, I understand. I do understand.
Wow. Well, that is probably the most intense story we've ever had on our show before, for sure.
Yep,
so
definitely.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate you sharing it with us too, because it's something that I never really expected to hear about, especially from just the sort of people that I've been around before. I know a lot of folks who have served as well, and I've not heard a story like that before. So to bring us back to an even keel, I will tell you a less scary-ish and more awesome-ish story. So at the end of my rotation, we were supposed to be, we were redeploying. We were coming back to Kuwait to sort of ramp down and get everything ready to go to come back. They don't just send you back. You have to go to Kuwait, and you have to hang out there for about 3 weeks, which everybody hates, but they have to do it for a variety of reasons. One, they want to see if you're going to get sick, if you're going to bring something back with you that no one in America has any defense against, and they want to check to make sure that you're not going to wig out, and they want to give you a little while to just sort of, like, all we really did was play soccer and football in Kuwait, which looks like the surface of Mars, if anyone was wondering. Outside of our air-conditioned tents, and there was a Subway, which was awesome. Like, not a Subway, but a Subway sandwich shop. You said two things that I'm really happy that you had. One is air conditioning, and
man.
two is Subway.
It's heavenly.
My sister used to tell me stories, though, where it's like you get like X amount of minutes to shower, and that's it. You better hurry the fuck up.
I mean, individual experiences may vary. I like to take a little longer in the shower, so I would shower in the middle of the night where I had lots of hot water. You can take as long as you want to shower where I was, as long as you don't mind showering in freezing water.
My sister was a Marine, so I assume she's at a different base completely, or whatnot.
It really is luck of the draw. Some people, like people over at Division, had relatively, like their lives weren't that different from working in the office. Like they worked in an office, they were never exposed so much to danger. But here's the thing. Even if they went over there and they were never, in the line of fire, they never went outside the wire, which I sadly cannot say applied to me. They were still trained to go over there, and they did not go over there expecting to work in an office. Every single one of them went over there expecting to pull a trigger.
Wow.
And,
so scary.
I give all of them, from the most nearsighted fobbit to the guys kicking indoors, nothing but love. So, the story that I was going to tell you to bring us back to an even keel. As we were redeploying, I realized that we were going to have to convoy back to Kuwait, which was a 2-day drive because, contrary to what you might think, military vehicles that don't have a good reason to generally don't move very quickly. And I went to my commander and I was like, sure, I know this is weird, but can I drive the LMTV, which is a much larger truck, which more importantly has more legroom? Can I drive the LMTV back? And he goes, yes. In fact, I'm so glad you volunteered because everything else is going by truck and we are going to fly back, but the LMTV needs to be driven. So thanks for volunteering for that. And I was like,
wow.
Shit. Well, that's the life. And I'm really glad it happened, actually. They say don't volunteer for anything. I would give the advice, make sure you know what you're volunteering for, if you can. Sometimes it works out really well, as you were about to hear. So, we're on this convoy, and some shenanigans happen that I'm not going to go into because I don't want to make us look bad. But the important part happens as we're settling down for the night. I was with two other people, one sitting in the cupola with the gun, and the other one driving, because I was the new guy, and I wasn't allowed to drive, and I certainly wasn't allowed to man a crew served. Or a light machine gun. So, basically I had nothing to do but look around and collect my thoughts on the subject. So we get to this tiny, tiny, tiny little fuel point, and military, I should say, army installations in hostile countries come in two flavors. The first one is like Division, where they're so big and so loud and so well provisioned, and they have enough juice to kill anything, that they can afford to have lights going on all night because they have operations going all night, and they have the kind of technology where if anybody gets too close that the powers that be don't like, they will find their body occupying the same space as 10 million billion bullets. The other kind, which is the kind that we were going to, is very small. And I'm not going to say it's less defended, it's just as well defended, but there's less like real estate, and they generally don't have the kind of 24-hour turnaround that everything else does. So they have all their lights off. Everything off. And in fact, there's usually, like for places that people congregate, like the chow tent, there's like a little vestibule you have to go through to make sure that no light spills out, because light gives people away. Subsequently, there were no light sources that night for about 250 miles, maybe 300 miles in any direction. And as we're getting out, it's dusk. And the guys that I was with were like, yeah, we're going to go to the sleep tent and we're going to go get some hot chow. And you're going to stay here and guard the truck because there's only one thief in the army. Everybody else is just trying to get their shit back.
What the what?
Wow.
What the what?
That's an oft repeated saying. There is only one thief in the army at any given time. Everyone else who steals stuff is just getting their stuff back. Everybody in the army, everyone has stolen something, whether it's at the unit level where, somebody, like a unit comes in and they misplaced all of their, all their tow hooks, in reset or something, or they lost them. And they're like, well, we have to get these tow hooks or we're going to get, our heads torn off. So they just very quietly go to another unit's motor pool in the middle of the night, and each one of them is armed with 2 wrenches, and somehow they all have their tow hooks the next day.
Wow.
And the other unit is not. So the other unit is like, well, we're going to get our heads torn off if we don't have these tow hooks. So they go to a different unit and get more tow hooks. And that is how there's only one thief in the army and everyone else is just trying to get their shit back.
One of my favorite things that my dad used to tell me growing up, because he always taught me about the Marines, is that during World War II, when there were battles going on, the Marine Corps still had World War I weaponry, almost like entirely. And after a battle, when people were resting, soldiers would find themselves going to sleep and waking up with a World War I gun, and they would see a Marine walking around with a gun that looked shockingly similar to theirs. And he said, like, that's sort of how they upgraded their armaments in World War II, which I always found fascinating. And I was wondering if he was bullshitting me, but now I definitely feel like he was telling me the truth.
That is probably true. In big force-on-force engagements, the kind that really don't happen anymore because everything's tracked by serial number. And if you turn in a weapon with the wrong serial number, there will be unbelievably unpleasant repercussions. Back then, there were just weapons lying around on a battlefield, so might as well. But anyway, this story. So no light sources within 250, 300 miles. Maybe you could tell where this is going. I went to sleep in the bed of the truck. And I woke up because someone was shining a light in my face. And I opened my eyes, and no one was shining a light in my face. I could see the entire Milky Way galaxy with no light pollution and just my naked little eyes. Just a riot of yellows and oranges and purples and greens, and dark clouds and things moving in a sort of like dance. You could almost see the debris around Earth moving,
wow, that's
like
so
just
cool.
dancing to the song of the firmament. It was so cool. I remember not getting any sleep that night. I just laid on my back with my hands behind my head watching it, and I was so grateful to the guys that I was with who never saw any of that. I was so grateful that things had worked out that way because it was such a cool moment to sort of get lost in and contemplate my place in the universe. It was a very nice capstone to that deployment.
That's pretty incredible. It's like everything led you to there, and the idea of sitting alone in darkness, for most people is terrifying. And I love that your first story was about being in this darkness that felt oppressive, and then all of a sudden you fall asleep. You're in the middle of nowhere in this place where there cannot be any sort of light. And then you just get to see something so incredibly beautiful just by opening your eyes and looking upwards. Like that's amazing.
Yeah.
It was incredible. Like it didn't even feel, some people look up at a night sky and they just sort of have this existential dread like I'm tiny. That was never even entered my mind. It's like Neil deGrasse Tyson says, we are stars and stars are us. And I just felt like I was a part of it all. And it was a really cool experience to bring us back from that last one.
Yeah, I think you did the job. That was to see something so incredible, and to not be like filled with fear, but just be awestruck by you have a place in it somehow, somewhere. You're lucky enough to be alive in the moment you are. Like, That's just like incredible. That's awesome.
But you imagine, people from a long time ago, before there was a lot of light pollution. And funnily enough, light pollution will figure prominently in this next story, which I am feeling loose enough in my current headspace to tell the story. That,
cool.
Like people for thousands of years, they looked up and that was what they saw. And we really, in our modern age, we have so many conveniences and advantages, but that is one thing that I feel like it is incumbent upon every human to eventually go see. Because you really do have to go out of your way, I mean, somewhere on the border between Iraq and Kuwait, to see something like that.
It's actually kind of funny because when you were describing it, that's the first thing that occurred to me is the people that used to see this are people that were around before all these technological advances, and we had like, leaps and bounds as time went on. But when you look up, I mean, we talk about things too on the show previously where back in the day if something was happening and it was nature and it was unexplainable, it had to be a god, and that's where certain things came from, certain superstitions came from. But when you can see something so massive and so profound, it's kind of easy to understand why people would be like, yeah, I'm tiny. Something that exists around me that's obvious to me is so much bigger than me. And then you sort of start to build like a belief structure around the things that you don't understand because they're just so awe-inspiring. I think that makes a whole lot more sense when you think about it in terms of that.
Not only that, but you could see them move in real time. That's something a lot of people don't.
Whoa.
Something that, like, I mean, you don't see nebulas move in real time. They're moving way too slowly and too far away. But, like, there's, I mean, not, if you ever watch, like, footage of someone doing a spacewalk, there is a cloud of shit around the Earth that you can see. There are some really big parts in it. And there are shooting stars all the time. And, like, and in that scenario, right, you think of somebody, you know, standing on top of their ziggurat, plotting the way that the stars work. It's different every night. And, if you're lucky, you could maybe see Orion's belt, which Orion's belt is something told to Westerners. It's not his belt, it's his penis. Let's all get
What's the what?
Let's all be clear on that. Yes.
I think the original term was Orion's dong, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, Orion's dong. Yes, I like it. It was, Orion was hard enough to hunt with, and that's why
slapped it on space.
Exactly.
Jesus Christ.
He dropped it on the table and all the glasses clinked. But, but in that sense, like, you see it and you're like, oh, that's Orion's belt. Somebody once looked at that and saw a hunter for some reason. No shit. In that circumstance, you can see the three-dimensionality of it, and it's totally possible somebody looked up at that and saw shoulders or arms or, yeah, sure, a penis or sandals or legs. Like, I'd believe it.
It's like just as easily as people look up in the sky and they see shapes in the clouds now, it's like at nighttime, it's not any different.
Exactly, and only the brightest ones. Anyway, so the third story also factors in some light pollution. So in Baghdad, which is one of the world's oldest cities, like the Tigris of the Euphrates, if you go into the drink and you're an American, you get an all-expenses-free paid trip in your very own quarantine bubble to somewhere where they test you for every disease known to man. Because for the entirety of recorded human history, people have been dumping their poop into the Tigris of the Euphrates. And it's the same Tigris. It's the same Tigris and Euphrates that go through Baghdad now. So that's some food for thought. Anyway, so it's a really old city, and they are, and especially, you know, in time of war, like, power's hard to come by. They don't generally run it at night, and at night everybody just goes to sleep because it's fucking dark. It's not, I can see the entire universe dark, but it's dark. And the building that we lived in, which was perhaps 200 feet from the place that I told you about in the last story, had been hit with a JDAM. And for those who don't know, a JDAM is a smart munition. I don't know exactly what smart means, but basically it carved... So this building's like 5 stories tall, and it's pretty long. It looks kind of like a resort, like the worst, most awful resort you've ever seen. and this JDAM hit it kind of in the middle, and if you can imagine that, is basically cut a perfect hemisphere out of this building. And when it hit, I mean, presumably several months or years before we ever got there, the overpressure... Are you guys familiar with drop ceilings? Like in a school or an office building? So you ever...
I've heard the term, but not necessarily, no.
So if you look up at a ceiling, like in an office building, they have that that stuff with all the cracks in it and the lattice that holds it up.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's called drop ceiling. And above that is all the HVAC and electronics and fixtures and take-ups and reclamation and ballast and all of that stuff that lets you have fans and air conditioning and light and power in a building. Right. And sometimes there's a drop floor, but that's kind of a newer thing. So in general, you're only going to see a drop ceiling. Well, those are just foam panels that sit in there, and the pressure wave from that JDAM blew all of the drop ceiling. You just smashed it all through the building. Well, in the lower floors where people lived, that wasn't really a big deal. People would just reach up and yank it all out, and they got new drop ceiling or tile or whatever to put back in there so that you weren't just like breathing asbestos, or you probably were. And I'm sure I'll be on another Scaryish thing being like,
oh God, no.
My lungs have grown tentacles. Anyway, So, but in the upper floors, it was all just hanging there. All this HVAC stuff and wiring just hang down from the ceiling. And, of course, every pane of glass in the building had been broken. They'd been replaced on the bottom, because that's where people lived. But on the upper floors, mostly they were open. And frequently I had business on the top floor or the roof of this building. And when you're up there, since it's open to the elements and all of this crap is hanging down, you can't have any lights on. Because if you shine a light, someone with a rifle will shoot you. And we don't want that.
Right.
So you have to walk in the dark through this pitch black city, or basically pitch black city, to get to the other end. And that's where all the stuff that we needed was. So my first night ever going up there, I was by myself, because this is another recurring theme of my time in Iraq.
A lot of time yourself.
You don't want to be by yourself at any point in a war zone. And yeah, that's another story for another day. So I'm up here by myself, and I've seen all the crap hanging down, so I know what's causing this. But it doesn't matter, because I have a lizard brain that's kept all of my ancestors alive by doing what it's about to do. And I get to the top of the stairs, and I get about 5 feet, and the wind blows, and I can feel the wind blowing. However, it's also blowing all of the stuff from the drop ceiling, and it's all rubbing together and making clinking sounds. And the totality of this is that it sounds like some ephemeral spectral form that barely exists in reality is running toward me.
Jesus.
And
oh my God.
And the sound with the wind, like there's a point where it draws abreast of you, and it's like whatever that thing was ran through you, and it makes you flinch. And I'm armed to the teeth. I'm wearing body armor. I've got a helmet on. I have bullets, so many bullets, and I am fucking ready to use them as this thing happens, and the wind keeps blowing from different directions, and it feels every time the wind blows like things are moving through there with just an uncanny amount of stealth. And that was how my coworkers found me when they went looking for me.
Oh my
God! was crouched, like, waiting for something to show up because my lizard brain would not let it go. They're like, are you okay?
I would be so terrified.
And at that moment, of course, I felt like a complete idiot. I was like, yeah, I guess so. I was just moving along here.
I was moving along here very, very slowly.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, just at that moment, I was just like, I wasn't scared exactly, but I really wanted to kill whatever it was that my lizard brain had 100% convinced me was stalking me through this building.
That is terrifying.
That's super terrifying.
Just the idea, I've seen a cornfield with a lightning bolt go right above it and then just explode with thunder. I've seen all these stalks move independently of one another, and it looked like things were running between, all of the different stalks towards our house growing up. I can only imagine if I had actually been in the corn stalks, but rather than coming from the ground, they've been hanging from the ceiling while that happened, and that is what I picture as your experience in this moment. Except
it wasn't even like the corn stalks. It was tiny pieces of cheap metal just barely touching each other. Right?
Oh my God.
Something's running at you through a cornfield, you will know.
Yeah, you'll hear the stalks breaking.
Something's coming after you. This is something moving with a level of stealth that is impossible for a human, or even, I would imagine, an animal to achieve. Right? And it is just flicking every alarm switch in my lizard brain. My lizard brain is like, there is a 600-pound tiger that is coming through the brush at you, and you don't know where it is. And I'm like, but I have a rifle, and my lizard brain is like, shut up! You're gonna die.
That's so, oh my gosh. I would do the same thing, where I would just be stuck there and not move. Someone would have to carry me out of there. I would be way too afraid.
I'd be probably telling myself the entire time, I'm not locked in here with it. It's locked in here with me. I'm trying to psych myself up I need to kill whatever's coming after me until someone's like, are you okay? And then I probably would have just like you been like, I'm fine. I'm just doing my thing.
So those are my scary stories.
That is incredible. I mean, that last one is super terrifying, and I think that's something that, even though, like, I've never been armed to the teeth except maybe, like, once or twice when I've gone shooting with my father, I couldn't even imagine putting myself in a position where I felt like I was being stalked.
But, like, being
in,
stuck
like,
by
darkness.
yourself, though, too. I think that is the most horrifying situation, where you're going into this completely alone. Like, the first story, you have your friends that can back you up, right? But then that last one is like, I'm alone. I'm fucked.
Or at least tell the people in charge how I died.
Right.
You will be accounted for when you go missing, at least. Man. So yeah, these are some absolutely incredible stories, Rhett. I sincerely appreciate you sharing them. I have gotten stories that are not like this before from a lot of my friends who have been deployed during different, military incursions and things like that. But to hear stuff from someone who was like boots on the ground, it's really humbling to hear of all these things that you went through, and you came out on the other side, and you are just, even when we met you for the first time, we're like, man, he's so articulate and he's so put together.
Right.
So it's just really, it's nice to know that, you came out just fine on the other side. And I think you're better off for the experiences that you had, even though some of them seemed very harrowing and horrifying in like very literal senses of those words. So one last time, thank you so much for your service to this country, and thank you so much for being on our show.
Yeah, I can't believe everything that you went through and everything that you've done for this country, and how incredibly talented you are. Being a talented you are, being a linguist is not easy, and especially a language that we don't use every day out here. You know, it's really impressive.
It was, it was my honor and pleasure, but I have to give once again, mad props to all of the people who see scary stuff like that, or saw scary stuff like that every day. And for them, it was just Tuesday, and they did what they had to do, and they drove on, and they did what they were told to do. They did what they needed to do. And, I'm just glad that I could be here to tell the story. I wish we could hear more of them, but some of it's in the telling, right? War is very unkind to people, it's unkind to everyone, but it's unkind to people who are sensitive to stories and emotions and empathy. And I will say a lot of people had it a lot worse than me. I had kind of a unique perspective because I could talk to the people who live there to some degree. And because I got to talk to them, I had a much different, more positive experience than anybody else. And I am grateful that it worked out like that it worked out that way every day. So thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, I'm glad you could be here.
Absolutely. And I just want to give one more shout out to the book that your wife has written. It's called Runaway. It's the Atlantis Chronicles book #1.
It is on Amazon.
Awesome. So go ahead and check it out. It is on Amazon. You can go ahead and purchase yourself a copy. And I would really like it. I know a lot of times we tell spooky friends when they're listening to episodes, like, we say stupid shit. Like, tell us if you like to have the fan on at night. #fan, #no-fan. I would just like folks who listen to this episode and enjoyed it to reach out to us on our social medias. Let us know how much you enjoyed it. That way we can get Rhett up and running here and understand that people really enjoyed his stories. And I know you've talked about getting this whole thing started. Harsh Rhetoric, I think, is the perfect pun and the perfect name for what you want to do. And I think other people out there that listen to the show are probably going to have a little bit to say when it comes to, yes, we want more. So
yeah,
spooky friends, reach out to us and let us know.
I bet there are other military individuals out there that have experienced interesting things, or were also deployed during that time, you know, and had strange experiences or things like that. And I think that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, we absolutely want to hear about it. So if you have something like that you'd like to say, you can hit us up on any of our social medias. Our Twitter is @ScarishPod, our Instagram is @ScarishPodcast, and our Facebook is facebook.com/ScarishPodcast. If you want to email us, you can email storytime@scarish.com. Let us know anything that might have happened to you. It doesn't have to be exactly similar to the things that Rhett shared with us. It can be completely separate. We usually go for stuff that's like paranormal, true crime, spiritual, supernatural, coincidental, sometimes stuff that you thought was somehow creepy, and then it wound up being something not creepy at all. And feel free to reach out to us with those as well. So again, storytime@scarish.com, or go to our website, scarish.com, click on Contact Us, and fill out that form, and that will come directly to us. Robin, to wrap up the show, why don't you tell folks who would like to donate, how can they do so?
You can go to our Patreon, patreon.com/ScarishPodcast. Those are monthly donations Tiers start at $1. At $1, you get ad-free. As Adam would say, ad-free is the way to be.
Ad-free is the way to be.
If you're not into the monthly donations tiers, if you're not into the monthly donations /tiers type thing, you can also go to coffee, ko-fi.com/Scaryish podcast, and those are one-time donations.
All right. And I think that's just about everything we have for this episode of Scaryish. Thank you again, Rhett, one more time for coming on the show. And I think it's a tradition to have our special guest sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we will see you next week.
Bye-bye.